Within the pages of Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the eponymous sage imparts three foundational doctrines: the will to power, the eternal recurrence, and the Übermensch. Having previously examined those first two concepts extensively, we now direct our focus toward deciphering the latter. To begin, we must analyze the linguistics of the term Übermensch itself. Initially, English translators interpreted it as beyond man, before shifting to Superman, a choice that unfortunately tangled the philosophical concept with the popular comic book hero. While alternative labels like superhuman and Überman exist, the eminent Nietzschean scholar Walter Kaufmann argues that Overman serves as the most accurate English equivalent. Moving forward, we shall adopt this specific translation, keeping in mind that the original German expression remains equally valid. The origins of this terminology can likely be traced to Ralph Waldo Emerson, a thinker for whom Nietzsche held immense admiration. In his personal writings, the German philosopher noted an unparalleled sense of belonging within Emerson's work, declaring it so intimately close to his own spirit that offering conventional praise felt impossible. Emerson famously introduced the concept of the oversoul in a titular essay, an idea that quite possibly guided Nietzsche toward the moniker Übermensch, thereby rendering the English translation Overman exceptionally fitting. Furthermore, Nietzsche's own rendering of oversoul into his native language as the higher soul likely shaped his recurring motif of the higher man. Interestingly, the overarching vision of the Overman did not fully crystallize until the latter stages of the philosopher's intellectual journey. Prior to this breakthrough, he frequently discussed the notion of free spirits, a conceptual precursor that would eventually mature into the character of Zarathustra, the very prophet who heralds the arrival of the Overman. In his early volume, Human, All Too Human, a book for free spirits, Nietzsche explicitly dedicated the text to these unborn, liberated minds, anticipating their gradual emergence into the world. During periods of severe sickness, profound loneliness, and enforced idleness, he sought solace and companionship in these visionary figures, using them as imaginary confidants to sustain his own morale. Ultimately, the role of such a liberated intellect is to relentlessly question orthodox lifestyles, thereby acting as a catalyst for genuine societal advancement. Within the narrative framework of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, achieving the status of the Overman is inextricably tied to the last stage of personal evolution, symbolized by the child. The philosopher outlines a necessary trio of spiritual transformations required to conquer oneself: the camel, the lion, and finally, the child. Attaining even the initial stage of the camel is no simple feat. It demands that you first embrace the path of the free spirit, deliberately abandoning familiar comforts to shoulder immense burdens and endure profound sacrifices. This requires a deliberate self-debasement meant to shatter your own arrogance, allowing your foolishness to be exposed as a potent critique of your presumed intellect. Essentially, Nietzsche posits that whenever you find yourself swelling with hubris, you must actively seek out heavier loads to shatter that illusion of greatness, enforcing a radical sense of humility. Following this grueling submission comes the awakening of the lion, a fiercely independent state driven by an absolute craving for liberty. In this guise, you must forcefully deliver a sacred no against the suffocating dogmas and societal structures that have historically kept humanity in chains. Ultimately, this rebellion paves the way for the final phase, the child, an embodiment of unbridled imagination and joyful spontaneity. Where the lion vehemently rejected the past, the child boldly proclaims a sacred yes, passionately embracing existence in its entirety. This represents a pristine dawn, completely unburdened by historical guilt or oppressive gravity, allowing you to finally actualize your authentic identity. By inhabiting the present moment with innocent fascination and boundless inventive power, you gain the capacity to forge entirely new values, constructing a distinct reality and stepping fully into the role of the Overman. As the highest conceivable iteration of humanity, the Overman effectively conquers the despair of nihilism by generating subjective meaning and anchoring his existence firmly in the tangible world, rather than pining for an illusory afterlife. Such an individual places unwavering trust in their own creative autonomy, refusing to lean on external deities or inherited moral frameworks. This figure represents the zenith of self-mastery, ascending beyond ordinary human limitations to welcome every hardship and triumph that fate presents to you. By decisively crushing the allure of mediocrity, this sovereign individual courageously embraces risk and peril as essential components of a vital existence, recognizing that the Overman shall be the meaning of the earth. We must understand that dominating one's own impulses remains the most demanding endeavor possible, requiring an extraordinary cultivation of internal strength rather than the subjugation of fellow mortals. This internal conquest intertwines seamlessly with the doctrine of the will to power, which functions fundamentally as the engine of continuous self-surpassing. If joy is defined as the visceral sensation of your own vitality expanding and obstacles being successfully dismantled, then the Overman inherently stands as the most joyous of beings, serving as the ultimate vindication for life itself. Contrary to popular assumption, however, the premiere of this concept did not actually happen within the text of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Instead, Nietzsche discreetly introduced the term in a specific aphorism found in the Gay Science. The invention of gods, heroes, and overmen of all kinds, as well as near men and undermen, dwarfs, fairies, centaurs, satyrs, demons, and devils, was the inestimable preliminary exercise for the justification of the egoism and sovereignty of the individual. The freedom that one conceded to a god in his relation to other gods, one eventually also granted oneself in relation to laws, customs, and neighbors. In that early passage, the prototypes for these supreme beings appear closely linked to the divine pantheon and legendary champions of Hellenic antiquity. For the philosopher, these ancient figures functioned as potent emblems, rejecting strict adherence to a universal standard, standing as the absolute opposites of dullness and cultural decay. Discovering your genuine identity requires you not to search for a hidden core buried deep inside, but to cast your gaze toward a potential version of yourself hovering infinitely far above you. This aphorism holds immense historical weight, offering a rare glimpse into the Overman just prior to the composition of his magnum opus. It is ultimately within Thus Spoke Zarathustra that the concept steps fully into the light, joining the eternal recurrence and the will to power, ideas that only gained their complete shape through the prophet's teachings. Leaving his solitary mountain retreat, Zarathustra enters a bustling town where a crowd gathers in the market square to witness a tightrope walker, and it is there that he boldly addresses the throngs. I teach you the Overman. Man is something that should be overcome. How have you managed to transcend your current state of being? Throughout history, every species has brought forth something greater than its own existence. Yet you seem willing to represent the receding wave of this profound movement, choosing to revert to a primal state rather than rising above your humanity. Consider how humanity views the ape, merely as an object of ridicule or a source of deep, uneasy shame. In the exact same manner, the ordinary individual will be regarded by the Overman as nothing more than a pathetic joke or an uncomfortable disgrace. Your evolutionary journey has carried you from a lowly worm to a human being. Yet, a significant portion of your nature remains firmly rooted in the dirt. Even though you evolved from primates, contemporary humanity often exhibits behaviors more primitive than any actual ape. I present to you the concept of the Overman, who represents the ultimate purpose and destiny of our world, a goal your own resolve must fiercely declare as the true meaning of terrestrial existence. You must actively seek the electrifying force that will strike and ignite you, embracing the necessary frenzy required to purge your spirit, because the Overman embodies both this illuminating strike and this purifying chaos. The gathered crowd utterly fails to grasp the depth of this message, erupting instead into mocking laughter as they mistakenly identify him as the acrobat they are waiting to watch, demanding that he begin his performance immediately. Hearing these shouts, the actual acrobat assumes the command is meant for him and steps out onto the wire, while Zarathustra observes the ignorant masses with profound astonishment before offering another revelation. He declares that humanity is merely a suspended cable stretched precariously over a bottomless void, connecting the primal beast to the exalted Overman. Every phase of this existence, whether moving forward, pausing in terror, or glancing backward, is fraught with peril, making the true value of humanity its function as a transitional bridge rather than a final destination. A beautiful process of transcending and descending. The foundational German manuscript of Thus Spoke Zarathustra relies heavily on intricate linguistic connections that often vanish when rendered in another language. As the isolated wanderer descends from the peaks after 10 years of solitude to distribute his accumulated wisdom, his physical journey embodies the concept of Untergang, or a deliberate going under. This downward movement stands in stark contrast, yet intimate connection with Übergang, the act of crossing over, and Überwindung, the process of conquering, both of which are linguistically bound to the ultimate ideal of the Übermensch, or Overman. Consequently, the act of Selbstüberwindung, or mastering oneself, demands a metaphorical descent, reinforcing the recurring philosophical theme that humanity is merely a condition to be surpassed, and whoever successfully conquers their own limitations transforms into the Overman. Despite his profound explanations, the audience remains oblivious, continuing to jeer at him and embodying the exact antithesis of the Overman, a concept known as the last man. These individuals desperately seek uniformity, revel in utter mediocrity, and recoil from any endeavor that carries the slightest hint of risk, finding complete satisfaction in being indistinguishable from their peers. Smugly blinking, they falsely believe they have unlocked the secret to true contentment. When the prophet details the nature of this pathetic archetype, the mob mockingly demands to be transformed into the last man, enthusiastically rejecting the elevated path of the Overman while howling with derisive laughter, which leads Zarathustra to realize with profound sorrow that his words are entirely unsuited for such a shallow audience. Meanwhile, the spectators shift their attention to the acrobat, who has navigated halfway across the treacherous wire, perfectly illustrating humanity's suspended evolution between the animalistic and the divine. Without warning, a motley clown appears from behind, relentlessly mocking the performer, before unleashing a demonic shriek and leaping directly over the man blocking his way. Watching his competitor effortlessly conquer the space, the acrobat panics, drops his balancing rod, and plunges toward the earth below. Rushing to the side of the mangled performer, Zarathustra listens as the man expresses his long-held fear of demonic retribution and hellfire, to which the philosopher gently clarifies that neither demons nor infernal realms exist, assuring the fallen artist that his consciousness will fade even quicker than his physical form. Gazing upward with skepticism, the dying man concludes that if no afterlife awaits, his existence has amounted to little more than that of an insignificant beast. The prophet swiftly rejects this despairing notion, praising the acrobat for dedicating his life to a perilous vocation and promising to personally dig his grave as a mark of profound respect for a life lost to honorable danger, prompting the man to offer a final, silent gesture of gratitude before passing away. This scene illustrates that embracing lethal risk possesses an inherent nobility utterly absent in the stagnant safety of the last man, emphasizing that a defining trait of the Overman is the absolute willingness to face existential peril head-on. Because embracing danger forms the crucial path to transcendence, the fundamental key to extracting maximum fulfillment and joy from our fleeting existence is to intentionally navigate a life fraught with risk. The philosophical narrative deliberately portrays the human condition as an individual balancing on a high wire, containing within themselves both the divine architect and the raw clay, encompassing the flaws of our animalistic nature alongside the profound potential of the human, superhuman ideal. This elevated state represents our most authentic identity, where the Overman emerges as the ultimate figure of supreme self-governance and internal discipline. By vehemently declaring that the Overman must become the core purpose of the world, the writer aggressively redirects our attention toward our present, tangible reality, stripping away the damaging obsession with a mythical afterlife. I strongly urge you to maintain your loyalty to this physical realm and reject the toxic peddlers of heavenly illusions. For these purveyors of otherworldly fantasies are decaying life-haters who cling to the outdated sins of a deceased deity. Committing an offense against our mortal world is currently the most horrific act, alongside prizing the mysteries of the inconceivable above the profound significance of our planetary existence. Nietzsche argues that fixating on a realm beyond the grave actually indicates a profound resentment toward reality, prompting the afflicted to construct an alternative universe designed to satisfy their desire for vindication. Sustaining this illusion demanded the fabrication of an immortal spirit detached from our physical form, ultimately breeding physical denial and harsh asceticism. For Nietzsche, however, it is crucial to understand that severing the intellect from the flesh is entirely impossible. Nietzsche viewed the fading influence of the Christian faith within our civilization as a profoundly alarming development, primarily because its absence threatened to unleash the destructive forces of nihilism. Through the striking narrative of the madman declaring the demise of God, a sense of profound tragedy permeates the cultural landscape. For centuries, Christianity had concentrated human aspirations on the hereafter, consequently stripping the present moment of its inherent value while promoting an unquestionable dogma that stifled all critical inquiry. Nietzsche theorized that this religious paradigm forged an engine of its own annihilation, a phenomenon he accurately described as a will to nothingness, which inherently opposes the flourishing of existence, while ironically remaining a potent driving force. Humanity displays a peculiar tendency to desire utter oblivion rather than existing without any desires at all, thereby injecting a highly toxic element into our daily affairs that strips our current reality of its worth. Consequently, the metaphorical death of God signifies the terrifying expansion of a vast, meaningless void. He recognized that our species confronts an unmatched existential threat that demands a profound metamorphosis or evolution of human consciousness. This projected advancement Nietzsche envisions is strictly philosophical rather than biological, demanding a rigorous interrogation of the foundational concepts driving Western intellectual history, alongside a radical shift in how we perceive our daily experiences. The root of this ongoing catastrophe stems from an ancient longing for the afterworld, a craving cultivated since the era of Socrates that seeks escape from the perceived confinement of our physical bodies and terrestrial constraints. Standing in stark opposition to this escapist fantasy, Zarathustra passionately urges that you must remain faithful to the earth. Propelling human development forward therefore necessitates dismantling the enduring dualism between mind and body, or spirit and nature, which has profoundly warped centuries of Western thought. Nietzsche intended to launch the monumental task of a revaluation of all values, utilizing the interrelated concepts of the Overman, the eternal recurrence, and the will to power. By providing a robust alternative to collapsing moral frameworks, this vision encourages you to divert your gaze from supernatural illusions and intensely focus your energy on the immediate, living environment. Serving as the ultimate remedy to a meaningless existence, the Overman emerges as the definitive purpose you must actively cultivate to conquer nihilism. This elevated state of being practically bursts with vitality and robust health, generating such an overwhelming surplus of power that it naturally compels the individual to bestow gifts upon the rest of society. Nietzsche notoriously extends beyond the mere collapse of Christian worship, declaring triumphantly at the conclusion of Zarathustra's prologue that all gods have perished, leaving the collective desire firmly fixed on the flourishing of the Overman as the ultimate goal for the great noontide. Nietzsche also details the concept of the higher men, distinguished individuals who function as concrete models for integrating his philosophical framework into reality. These are fiercely independent figures who rely on their own strength to ascend, deliberately refusing to be elevated by the efforts of the collective masses. An individual is compelled to expand their stature until they are capable of withstanding the devastating strike of the heavens, growing tall enough for the lightning. Such exceptional minds are frequently characterized by Nietzsche as free spirits, philosophers of the future, and creative geniuses, blending rigorous intellectual integrity with a profound intuition for art. Cultivating a highly artistic approach to existence is heavily encouraged, a standard that Nietzsche fiercely attempted to embody throughout his own personal journey. Placing himself firmly in the company of poets and artists, he viewed his intellectual pursuits through a deeply creative lens. Reflecting on this in the fourth segment of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the sage Zarathustra realizes the foolishness of his initial attempts to enlighten the masses by directly addressing the chaotic marketplace. He quickly discovered that projecting a message to a massive crowd effectively meant communicating with absolutely no one. Consequently, Nietzsche intentionally does not craft his literature for mass consumption, a reality reflected in the subtitle describing Thus Spoke Zarathustra as a volume for all and none. His primary audience consists solely of that rare fraction of the population prepared to embrace significant danger, to extract genuine fulfillment and joy from their fleeting moments. The narrative warns you, the higher men, that the general public remains entirely blind to exceptional individuals, preferring the comforting illusion that all people are fundamentally identical beneath a heavenly watcher. However, with a recognized collapse of that celestial authority, the comforting myth of universal equality is finally shattered. Despite their elevated status, these higher men still fall short of becoming overmen. Through Zarathustra's rigorous instruction, they are forced to confront their own glaring inadequacies. The prophetic voice acknowledges their impressive stature, while simultaneously declaring them insufficiently robust or towering to meet the final standard. Zarathustra explicitly stated earlier that this ultimate evolutionary step has never actually materialized, noting that he had observed both the greatest and the smallest of humanity stripped bare. Even the most impressive figures throughout history have proven remarkably similar to the lowest, revealing themselves to be unmistakably all too human. A persistent debate remains regarding whether a higher man could ever achieve absolute perfection, or if they would inevitably retain flaws typical of our species. Regardless of this uncertainty, the core identity of the Overman remains firmly rooted in the continuous, agonizing process of self-overcoming. This visionary archetype is inextricably linked to his philosophical framework of the will to power and the demanding concept of the eternal recurrence. This cyclical theory dictates that you must be willing to endure your exact timeline repeatedly, facing every agonizing defeat and triumphant victory in an endless, unbreakable loop. Rather than remaining a detached hypothesis, The eternal recurrence served as an intensely personal reality for Nietzsche, representing the ultimate trial in a life heavily burdened by physical and emotional anguish. In Twilight of the Idols, he positioned himself as the final disciple of the philosopher Dionysus and the primary instructor of this cyclical reality, teaching that profound joy inherently demands a deep, everlasting continuity. Those fragile souls who tolerate reality merely by anticipating heavenly rewards would be completely obliterated by this terrifying doctrine, while the strong would harness this heaviest weight as the ultimate catalyst for achieving perfection. To truly embrace existence, you must understand the concept of eternal recurrence, which serves as the absolute validation of our reality through an endless loop of everything you experience right now. According to Friedrich Nietzsche, achieving this perspective demands a profound and fiery passion for living. He suggests that you must yearn for nothing more intensely than this final, everlasting guarantee and validation of your own timeline. This journey of conquering your own limitations forms the core of what is known as the will to power. Rather than dominating others, this is an internal mastery where you forge your true identity by continuously colliding with adversity. In this crucible, agony and ecstasy become permanently intertwined. You will find that enduring immense suffering unlocks a profound, godlike euphoria within your spirit. Walking this arduous path pushes you closer to the ideal of the Overman, a supreme being who wholeheartedly welcomes the endless cycle of existence with immense elation as the ultimate champion of reality. This perfectly aligns with Nietzsche's famous declaration that human greatness relies entirely upon amor fati, a radical mindset where you desire absolutely nothing to change, neither in the past, the future, nor throughout all of eternity. Because your inner character remains in a perpetual state of evolution, striving for seemingly unattainable cosmic heights means you are constantly chasing the most magnificent objectives imaginable. Ultimately, this relentless drive to surpass your former self acts as the central pillar uniting the will to power, the vision of the Overman, and the daunting reality of eternal recurrence. Mastering this interconnected triad represents, without a doubt, the foundational core of Nietzsche's entire philosophical framework.